Today we're going to be talking about distribution channels. How does your product get from your company to your customer? You're all familiar with the business model canvas. We've already talked about value propositions, and we've talked about customer segments in the last two lectures. But today we're going to talk about channels. So let's take a look at our business model canvas. Channels is just one of the 9 boxes in the canvas, and it's a series of hypotheses of how does our product get from our company to our customer. Now, when companies first started, they were essentially manufacturing concerns, and they hired agents, outsiders, to be their sales channel. And the first types of companies we had made physical products, and therefore had physical channels, salespeople, stores, etc. But with the emergence of the web, we now have web and mobile channels. And so a choice for us is picking the right distribution channel. We're going to talk about physical versus web mobile channels. So one of the best ways to understand channels is to think about how business first started. We first started distributing and making physical products, cars, food, utilities, etc. And we distributed them through direct sales force. That is, people you shook hands with, looked in the eye, and met. And it wasn't until the mid-20th century that we actually started selling virtual products, things that didn't quite exist physically, like insurance, stocks and bonds, enterprise software, shrink-wrap software, started to be distributed through physical channels, but they didn't exist in the real world. But it wasn't until the mid-1990s, with the emergence of the Internet, that we were able to distribute physical products through a virtual channel. Think of Amazon, or Zappos, or Netflix. Even consumer electronics sold through the web. And what's happened in the beginning of the 21st century is we now have products that don't exist at all. Facebook, Twitter, Google, they're all bits, and they're also distributed via the web. This virtual distribution channel allows for easier customization, optimization, and allows you to change both product and channel almost on the fly. Through the rest of this lecture, we're going to show you which channels might be optimum for your startup and allow you to choose which one to pick. If you remember in our last slide, one of the choices was whether you were using physical or virtual distribution channels. Let's take a look at virtual channels, which are not only the web, but also might include iPhone apps or the cloud as well. The first choice might be dedicated e-commerce. That is, you might have a website that belongs to you, and that is one choice. Another choice is that you might have an app that runs on a mobile device. And mobile devices like Android and Apple and others and Microsoft require you to use their platform, App Store. And so that might be a choice. Another choice is to use two-step distribution. That is, there might be other distributors who have major web presences, Amazon, Walmart, other local and regional stores, and you might actually sell your virtual product through theirs, or physical products. You might use an aggregator. An aggregator is somebody who takes a vertical market approach, insurance, shoes, etc. Some examples are for insurance, LendingTree or Zappos. Another might be social commerce. Social commerce sites for distribution might include Facebook, Twitter, etc. Zynga, which is a video game company, uses predominantly Facebook as its platform. And then finally, flash sales. Examples include Groupon and Living Social. Now, the first instinct of almost any startup founders, when you understand all the choices for distribution channels, is to say yes. And the question is, yes to what? You can't afford to pick multiple channels on day one. Most successful startups pick one of these and then may eventually expand into others. So the question for you is, what's going to be your first distribution channel on the web, cloud, or for mobile devices? Maybe your product requires a physical distribution channel. Let's take a look at all the choices that you might have when you start your company. The first one is you might be an OEM. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. You might have a component, let's say a graphics chip, that goes inside of someone else's laptop. So you might be a graphics supplier to Apple or Hewlett-Packard. but it's Apple and HP's name and their brand that shows up on the outside of the box. And so while you're making money, it is their marketing and brand. So for a system integrator, you might be selling to a company, let's say you're Cisco, but you're selling to somebody who's building an entire telephone switching network. And this system integrator would take your component, your switches and routers, and actually build out a system that includes devices from other companies, and they add some value-added software and additional hardware and create an entire system for an end user. A value-added reseller might take a computer system, add other prepackaged softwares from other third-party vendors, add maybe some utilities of their own, and sell a turnkey solution to an end user. And so they build less complex systems with less value added than system integrators, but they could be great partners. In a physical channel, a direct sales force are salespeople that work for you directly and typically sell directly to the end user. Now, if you're delivering a physical product, one of the alternate channels that you might want to consider is the web or online sales as well. So for some industries, distributors play a pivotal role in the distribution of the product. They provide wholesale warehousing, they provide distribution and accounting, bill collection, etc. And distributors might sell to dealers. Most dealers are just simply storefronts. Some of them might actually add some service or support, but they're essentially an extension of the distribution channel. And they talk to the end users. So dealers might not have a physical storefront for end user customers, but retailers are all about Main Street and talking to your customers. Another form of retailer are mass merchants. So instead of just small storefronts, they aggregate tens or hundreds of thousands of products under one roof. Retailers and mass merchants often, though not always, get their products supplied through distributors. So let's take a look at the channel economics. In other words, how are we going to make money? So let's take a look at a direct sales example. You have a sales force and you're selling directly to the end consumer. So let's assume that the list price of your product is $100. So one of the first questions in thinking about how to come up with this $100 list price is to understand how much did it actually cost me to manufacture a product. Now, in the web, it might be the cost of my engineers. But in a physical product, it might be the costed bill of materials coming out of my factory. And so let's assume for the sake of discussion that that was $33. $33 to build my product. Next, let's take a look at the costs of my R&D, that is my engineering, the cost of my direct salespeople, maybe commissions or direct sales compensation, and then general and administration costs, what it cost me to have leases and lunches and free snacks, and that might be another $20. And so right now, it's $53 just to keep the lights on in my building. Now, something we should consider is that no end user pays list price. So let's assume that this area represents a discount from the list price, let's say 10%. That means your revenue to your company would not be $100, but $90. So wait a minute, you're getting $90, but you spent a total of $53 building the product and keeping the lights on. And that leaves right in the middle how much profit you have. In this case, it would be $37. So your selling costs were embedded here. This was the commission or direct sales cost or whatever you were paying your direct salespeople, and you made $37 selling directly. So now that we looked at channel economics for direct sales, let's go take a look at what the channel economics would look like if we were selling through an indirect channel, resellers. So as you can see, we still have the same cost of goods to manufacture the product as before, $33. Now what's kind of interesting is if we look at the R&D selling cost and general administration cost, our R&D might be the same and keeping the lights on in the building might be the same, but our selling costs are lower because we're selling through resellers. we still need a direct salesperson, but this time instead of them talking to every possible end user, they're actually talking to a few number of resellers. So let's say instead of $20, our SG&A, sales, general, and admin cost plus R&D this time is $15 rather than $20. And that the total of getting the product out the door is now $48. Just like before, our list price is $100, and in the store, the end user expects maybe a 10% discount, and so the revenue to the sales channel this time, not to us, is $90. But this time, we have resellers, and the resellers don't work for us. They're the ones actually selling the product, and they take the difference between $90 and, let's say, $70, which they're going to pay us. And so their profit is $20 for carrying, stocking, and reselling our product, and our profit is just $22 this time because we're selling through someone else. But remember, our costs were lower. So one of the trade-offs in using what's called an indirect channel is that your selling costs are lower, but you're giving a big chunk of your profit to other people not part of your company. So let's take a look at channel economics, but this time assume you are an original equipment manufacturer and your product becomes some other customer's cost of goods. So let's assume this diagram on the top is a laptop computer sold through a computer reseller channel. And let's say this laptop sells for $3,000. And like any other channel, the end user assumes they get a discount. The reseller is taking a profit, but gee, that reseller was actually buying these laptops from a master distributor. Now, remember, back here, the manufacturer of the laptop had their cost of goods, sometimes abbreviated COGS, which include manufacturing costs, components, etc. And finally, they had their sales costs, their R&D costs, and their general and administrative costs. And finally, after all that, they make a profit. So where do you fit? This is just a laptop manufacturer. Assume this is Apple or HP. But in this case, you were a graphics chip supplier to Apple or HP, and you were just one single component on their motherboard. Well, if you really think about it, you were fitting in here in their cost of goods. And now your cost of goods, your sales, general, and administrative costs, your profit, and now your reseller costs. Now, in some cases, you might have been selling directly your parts into HP or Apple, and you would not have reseller costs, but you would have more direct sales costs. Remember, this stands for sales, general, and administrative costs. And so your profit is minuscule compared to what the laptop manufacturer is making, but you might be selling millions of single chips. And so that profit is multiplied by that high volume when you OEM a product.